Hello, everyone. Welcome back again to the Spirit of Prophecy podcast. Appreciate you joining me for another episode. I'm really excited about today's episode. I have been wanting to hit the preterists for a while, and I'm hoping over the next weeks to do a lot of stuff dealing specifically with full preterism and a lot of the arguments that they teach. I do believe that preterism is going to be a big battle that specifically is going to be being fought in a lot of Baptist churches, evangelical churches. They are exploiting all the errors that are in these churches because of the dispensationalism. Dispensationalism has so many bad arguments. They have so many errors, and the preterists are doing a good job of showing these errors. But then the problem is they're inserting other areas or other errors. And I believe greater errors. The other thing, too, that we're seeing take place is there are things that in the futurist world that while we are technically right as far as what we believe about what is to come, for example, that Christ is still going to return. While we're right about that, often we misuse Scripture to teach that, and we never want to misuse any Scripture. And if you get busted for misusing a Scripture, just repent, get it right, fix it. Otherwise, the enemy will exploit that. They will show this clear error that you are making. And then, therefore, now they'll just discredit everything that you say. It's kind of like we're hearing a lot of stuff now about Cohen and Trump and how he is, lied before under oath. And so it's discredited everything he's saying, and he could be telling the truth about Trump. I don't know. I haven't paid that much attention, but the fact that he's a proven liar, it's making it very hard for him. And so if we are not willing to change on something that we get wrong, on an error that we make, then the enemy is going to exploit that even and use it against us, even in areas where we are right. And so what I'm calling this particular episode, or what I'm putting on the title, is Behold, he cometh with clouds. We're going to talk about that line. And then in parentheses, the preterists are right, kind of. Or they're kind of right. And I'm saying that because of the fact that, in dealing with preterists and looking into some of their arguments, I've seen areas where they are saying some true things that futurists don't say. And that's another area, too, where preterists, way they're kind of winning people over is they are expressing truths that you do not hear from the futurist world. And so people looking at it like, wow, these people obviously know something that the futurists don't know. Therefore, they must be right. Jesus already returned. And that is a huge leap that people shouldn't be making, but they are. And so I've listened to some of their arguments. I had Don Preston on the program. And when it comes to preterists, I understand. I do believe there's some serious heresy there, but I did appreciate him. He was a gentleman. He was kind. I reached out to him, and it was real easy to schedule with him. Obviously we didn't debate, but he was very willing to come on. He knows what he believes. He knows his stuff. He's not like other preterists I've dealt with. I'm attempting to do a debate with a preterist right now, but it keeps getting delayed because he needs more preparation. It's like, don't you know what you believe about this? And same thing too when it comes to my position on things. I like to know the format of a debate so I can know what I need to come prepared for and things like that. But these full preterists, they got to know like every detail about what you believe on everything. There was another guy that we tried setting up a debate with, and he wanted to have a debate before the debate, pretty much. He was asking all these questions, and if he didn't like your answer, then he would just freak out. And finally, he just like, I'm not doing the debate. And it's like, well, wait, if you asked what I believe, I said what I believe. If I'm wrong, prove it in the debate. But they've got to know everything you're going to say because they're not really looking to just present what they believe is truth. They're just looking to win an argument. Okay. And I don't believe Don Preston's like that. Again, I like him as a person. These other guys, though, I don't know what their problem is. It's like, why aren't you able to just, why aren't you ready now? You have this position This is your belief system. Why are you not ready to talk about it, defend it? It's really weird. And so I think it's because it's not the most thought out position. They know how to respond to dispensationalists and highlight their errors. But when it comes to the non-dispensational futurists, I don't think they're as ready for us. And we are the ones who are going to defeat them. And dispensationalists, you better take some lessons, because they're going to start winning your people over. It's becoming a bigger thing, and you will not be able to remain in error and win people over. The preterists are going to exploit those errors. You need to repent of all of them, and it will make a big difference. And so what I want to do, I want to talk about what the preterists say and how they interpret, behold, he cometh with clouds, and every eye shall see him, and show where they're right. And it's a truth that you don't hear spoken of in the futurist world. But at the same time, we don't need to be afraid to speak of this, because of the fact that it does not debunk what we teach. In fact, I think this can help us with some very difficult passages. And so let us, first off, they will go to, when they look at that phrase, they'll say, well, what you got to understand is that when you come up with clouds, that's a reference to coming in judgment. And did you know that that's actually a very true statement? That Christ coming in clouds is, in fact, a reference to judgment. And so what they will do to prove that is they will go to Isaiah 19. And in Isaiah 19, it says, the burden of Egypt, behold, the Lord rideth upon a swift cloud, and shall come into Egypt. And the idols of Egypt shall be moved at his presence, and the heart of Egypt shall melt in the midst of it. And I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight every one against his brother, and every one against his neighbor, city against city, kingdom against kingdom. And the spirit of Egypt shall fail in the midst thereof, and I will destroy the counsel thereof. And they shall seek to the idols, and to the charmers, and to them that have familiar spirits, and to the wizards. And the Egyptians will I give over to the hand of a cruel Lord, and a fierce king shall rule over them, saith the Lord of hosts. So Isaiah 19 clearly is a prophecy about judgment coming on Egypt. And of course, God is using another nation to do this. I believe this is a reference to the Assyrians. And it was the Assyrians that came and defeated them. But yet, in this reference to the Assyrians coming and defeating Egypt, it refers to the Lord riding upon a swift cloud. That this was God's judgment on Egypt by the hand of the Assyrians. But yet, we don't see the Lord literally riding on a cloud, And so that's what the preterists do. What we always accuse them of doing, and I think they would have to admit they do this, is they allegorize many things that are prophetic. They allegorize everything in Revelation. They allegorize pretty much everything in prophecy. When we see Jesus coming in the clouds, in our futurist mind, we literally see Jesus coming in the clouds. Now, I don't know where we get that. Maybe it has something to do with Acts, where they literally watch Jesus ascend to heaven, and a cloud receive him out of their sight, and the angel says, you will see him come in like manner as ye have seen him go into heaven. And they saw him visibly exit the world in the clouds, and we will see him visibly return to the world in the clouds. That's what we believe in the futurist world. And we believe that is still to come. And so what they will teach, but what they teach is that no, this was him coming in judgment on Jerusalem through the Roman army in 70 AD. So they clearly allegorize it. When we see 1 Thessalonians 4, the Lord himself shall descend from heaven. We see Jesus himself descending from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, the trump of God. We see him being caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. We, in the futurist world, believe that we will literally be physically caught up into the clouds, and that we will meet Jesus, our lost loved ones, in the air with the Lord. That is what we believe. In the preterist world, they allegorize that, and they feel confident in doing that because, for sure, in Isaiah 19, we have the Lord coming on a swift cloud, and it's not the Lord physically coming. It's the Assyrians coming on Egypt in judgment. And so the coming in clouds, behold, he cometh with clouds. In 1 Thessalonians 4 and Matthew 24, when we see him coming in the clouds, that's all allegorical of a coming in judgment on Jerusalem. So let me just say, Christ coming in the clouds is in fact a reference to judgment. But does that mean that the preterists are right in everything they say? Does that mean he came in 70 AD? And let's look at some more examples of this too, because I definitely think we can associate coming in the clouds with judgment. And so Psalms 18 verse 3 says, I will call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised. So shall I be saved from mine enemies. The sorrows of death compassed me, and the floods of ungodly men made me afraid. And we see in the Bible too, flood is often a reference to soldiers, and armies coming. Says, the sorrows of hell compassed me about, the snares of death prevented me. In my distress I called upon the Lord, and cried unto my God, and heard my voice out of his temple, and my cry came before him, even to his ears. Then the earth shook and trembled. The foundation also of the hills moved and were shaken, because he was wroth. There went up a smoke out of his nostrils, and a fire out of his mouth devoured. Coals were kindled by it. He bowed the heavens also, and came down, and darkness was under his feet. And he rode upon a cherub, and did fly. Yea, he did fly upon the wings of the wind. He made darkness his secret place. His pavilion round about him were dark waters, and thick clouds of the skies. At the brightness that was before him, thick clouds passed, hailstones and coals of fire. The Lord also thundered in the heavens, and the highest gave his voice. Hailstones and coals of fire. Yea, he sent out his arrows and scattered them. He shot out lightnings and discomfited them. The channels of waters were seen, and the foundations of the world were discovered at thy rebuke. O Lord, the blast of the breath of thy nostrils. He went from above. He took me. He drew me out of many waters. Now, I think we would all agree that this is a passage about judgment. And we see the Lord, and we see the clouds. We see the thick clouds. But here's something else we also see. Deliverance. Okay, we see deliverance also being spoken of here. But yes, coming in clouds is a reference to judgment. In Daniel 7:13, it says, I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and brought him near before him. And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all people, nations, and language should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. And so here we have a reference, we would say, is the coming of Christ, and it refers to him coming in the clouds of heaven. Joel 2 says, verse 1, blow ye the trumpet in Zion, sound an alarm in my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord cometh. For it is nigh at hand, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and of thick darkness, as the morning spread upon the mountains, a great people and strong. There hath not been ever the like, neither shall it be any more after it, even to the years of many generations. A fire devoureth before them, and behind them a flame burneth. The land is as the Garden of Eden before them, and behind them a desolate wilderness, yea, and nothing shall escape them. And I just taught through Joel in Sunday school in our church, and this is a reference to the armies coming on Israel and basically taking over the land, and it refers to, it's a day of clouds, and then it talks about armies that are coming. And so again, in the futurist world, we see day of the Lord, and our brain immediately goes to the future, to the end. But here in Joel, this is a reference to judgment that is going to be coming on Israel and on Jerusalem for sure. And I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this. I don't want to get ahead of myself, I guess, because I'll say something about this in a little bit. But in the Bible, we do see that the day of the Lord, which I believe is a future coming day of judgment. I believe that the Bible from the beginning prophesied a day of judgment coming on the earth, not just the land. A lot of the new Bibles, when it says, behold, he cometh with the clouds, and every eye shall see him, and all the tribes of the earth shall mourn, it changes it to land. Because when you see earth, you think about the whole world. When you see land, well, what land? And then they'll say the land of Israel. And that's what some of the preterists do in their videos. But no, there is a time coming. Okay, before there was a Jerusalem, before there was an Israel, Enoch prophesied of the Lord coming with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment. I believe the day of the Lord is something that's always been known about, a day of global judgment. But throughout time, there have been local judgments that have been prophesied. In these prophecies, especially the minor prophets, they're often prophesying towards Jerusalem, towards Edom, towards Egypt, towards all Assyria, towards Nineveh. All these different places, judgments are being pronounced on them, and it always uses end days, apocalyptic language. And so there's principles that we can get from that we could apply to the future, but we cannot deny the fact that these prophecies are primarily about local judgment during that time and in that generation. And for sure, that's what we see in Joel. And so again, this is just another reference to clouds being a reference to judgment and showing that it is done through armies. Armies coming on them was the judgment, and it uses that language of clouds. So let's keep looking at some more examples. Zephaniah 1:14, the great day of the Lord is near. It is near and hasteth greatly. Even the voice of the day of the Lord, the mighty men shall cry there bitterly. That day is a day of wrath, a day of trouble and distress, a day of wasteness and desolation, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness. And again, local judgments, but yet it uses that end of days apocalyptic literature. And we do the same thing today. Anytime there's going to be like a disastrous event coming, we'll compare it to Armageddon. If we are, if we're playing a ball game, or if there's going to be a fight, a lot of times before, while somebody's like giving this speech before, this is your Armageddon. This, and we use those phrases like that. And obviously we're not saying it's the literal biblical event, but we're making a comparison, and they do that in the Bible. And so again, I show all this to just show that this coming in clouds is something that is used in the Old Testament, referring to judgment, and specifically to judgment by armies, for sure. And so what the preterists do, when we get to Matthew 24:30, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And they'll say that is a reference to judgment coming on Jerusalem, because without a doubt, much of what we see in Matthew 24, in fact, Matthew 24 is specifically about judgment on Jerusalem. There's no doubt about that. And how was Jerusalem judged? Who did God use to judge Jerusalem? Well, he used the Romans. There's no doubt about that. And the Roman armies came on them. So in the futurist world, when we read Matthew 24:30, we see Jesus literally coming in the clouds and rescuing us. The preterists, they see the Roman armies coming, because it was judgment sent by God. So here's the thing. Both people are right. Okay, these things are a reference to armies coming on to Jerusalem, but at the same time too, even Jesus is using this theme of using this apocalyptic language to describe what was going to be coming for Jerusalem, and it doesn't change the fact that it was a picture, it was a sample of what was going to come on all the world in the future. And that's what I believe we're seeing in Revelation. Okay, in Revelation, we are seeing it is a reference to judgment on the world, judgment on the world, not just judgment on Jerusalem. This judgment that is going to be coming on the world, it was prophesied as far back as Enoch, and in Revelation, we clearly are not just looking at Jerusalem. We're not just looking at Israel. We are reading about global events. What we see in 70 AD, it was another sample. It was another shadow of what was to come. And just understand too, and I'm not going to get into this, but I think it is abundantly clear that Revelation was written after 70 AD, which completely throws out preterism. Revelation cannot be talking about the destruction of Jerusalem if Jerusalem has already been destroyed. Okay, but even if it was written before, it still doesn't really change anything. It does give them a better case, but it's still not a slam dunk or anything like that. But if it is written after 70 AD, it's over for the preterists. And so look at Revelation chapter 14. Okay, Revelation chapter 14. It says in verse 15, and another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud, thrust in thy sickle and reap, for the time has come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. And so this isn't talking just about Jerusalem. It's talking about the harvest of the earth. This is global. Everything we see in Revelation is global. It's not about Jerusalem. Okay? And in the futurist world, we have rightly, over the years, we've gone back to these minor prophets. We've gone back to prophecies about local judgments, and we have taken those principles, and we have accurately, connected them to events that are in the future, based on what we know is future from the book of Revelation. But what we've also done in the futurist world is we have ignored the immediate and the local interpretation of those things that was meant for a certain people in the time that they were given. We've just ignored that, to the point that a lot of futurists, they get bent out of shape if you start talking about Matthew 24 having anything to do with 70 AD. They lose their minds over that. It does not compute. And it's because they've not actually studied things out. They're just repeating a system or a dogma that they've got from their favorite prophecy preacher. They've never actually studied these things out themselves in any real way. Otherwise, there would be no ignoring these things. And what's happened in the futurist world, we've kind of let the dispensationalists describe how certain events are going to look. And then in like the post-trib world, what we've done is we visualize all of the events of the future almost identically to the pre-tribbers. We've just rearranged the events into a more accurate way. But again, our focus has not always been the focus of the Bible. The focus of the Bible is one thing, and then our focus is another thing. And so whenever we've read about the clouds and Jesus coming in the clouds, we're all focused on the deliverance and the rapture. And there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, it doesn't change the fact that, it's also the Bible is actually focusing on God's judgment coming on the world. And so we've just ignored that to the point where a lot of times when the preterist starts pointing these things out, we think we've got to debunk what they're saying. But no, they're right. It is a reference to judgment. The focus of this passage is judgment coming on the land. But here's the question we should be asking. Does that mean we're not going to have this event where we get caught up and see the Lord in the air in the clouds? No, it doesn't. It doesn't do that. But you end up looking really bad when you just try denying this truth that they're saying, thinking it somehow debunks, what you believe that is true. Okay, and so there needs to be consistency. And in Revelation, one of the problems in Revelation with everyone is we forget that it's mainly a book about Jesus. It's the revelation of Jesus Christ. It's not the revelation of events to come. It's a revelation of Jesus Christ. And we happen to see things that will be hereafter in there, but the focus is Jesus. The focus is on his power and his authority and him bringing judgment to the world. We're always just wanting to find out where we're at in this and what part we play. And we can learn some of those things, but let's not miss the big picture. Okay, many are missing the big picture. And so it goes on to say, so God's judgment's coming. Verse 15 again, another angel came out of the temple crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud, thrust in thy sickle and reap, for the time has come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. And he that sat on the cloud thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. And another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the altar which had power over fire, and cried with a loud cry to him that had the sharp sickle, saying, thrust in thy sharp sickle, and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. And the angel thrust in his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress, even under the horse bridles, by the space of 1,600 furlongs. So what we're seeing here, we're seeing two reapings. Okay. Now forget everything you've heard from the futurist world, because again, what I'm going to say isn't even going to contradict probably what you've been taught, but I'm probably going to say a little bit different, okay, because I'm keeping the focus where the Bible does. And here in Revelation 14, what we are seeing here is we are seeing two reapings. We are seeing a gathering for judgment, but we're also seeing a gathering for protection. I believe that's what we're seeing. I believe that first angel, it reaps, I believe, the believers and takes them out of the world. The second angel, it's gathering the world for the the day of judgment that's coming. And that's what the events of Revelation are. It's just showing how God is judging the world and what God is going to do to bring the armies to Jerusalem for that final battle, so he can give the final, do the final takeover, an ultimate takeover in the world. And so here in Revelation 14 again, though, we see clouds referenced, because this is about a coming in judgment. And just interestingly enough, first mention of clouds is in Genesis 9 after the flood. Now, it had never rained before the great flood. And so if it had never rained before the great flood, I think you could probably assume they didn't have clouds before the great flood. Now, obviously, the Bible doesn't say they didn't have clouds, but typically that's what clouds are. They've got water in them. They've got rain in them. And so, we don't know what, people speculate all the time on what the earth looked like, and some people are even dumb enough to argue and get really hostile about it. But here's the thing. When the rains came for the 40 days and 40 nights, clouds came in that day. And so you can kind of see how Noah and his family would have associated clouds with judgment, when it was literally clouds that came on the earth and brought judgment that destroyed the whole earth. And so the first time we see the word cloud or clouds in the Bible is in Genesis 9:12. And God said, "This is the token of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth. And it shall come to pass, when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow shall be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And the water shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. And the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it, that I may remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, this is the token of the covenant which I established between me and all flesh that is upon the earth." And he's talking about the whole world. He's not talking about Jerusalem. But notice God put that rainbow in the cloud, because you can kind of understand how they would have probably had some serious PTSD after this. And anytime they saw clouds, they'd freak out a little bit. Every time it rained at first, they probably freaked out a little bit. But then, you know what? They would always see it eventually clear up. They would see that rainbow in the cloud, and it's like, we're not going to die. God's not going to flood the earth again. And so you can kind of see how from the beginning of time, clouds would have been associated with judgment, or at least of the new world after the flood. But the cloud also, here's another thing. So the preterists, when they read about a cloud, they only see judgment. They only see armies coming. And they believe, behold, he comes with the clouds. That's only a reference to him coming on Jerusalem through the Romans and in judgment. Okay? But here's the thing about that too. I think the cloud, while it is a picture of judgment, it's also a picture of God's protection to his people. In Exodus 14, verse 19, it says, "And the angel of God went before the camp of Israel and removed and went behind them, and the pillar of the cloud went from before their face and stood behind them. And it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel, and it was a cloud and darkness to them," talking about the Egyptians, "but it gave light by night to these, so that one came not near the other all the night." So in that story, when the Egyptians are coming after Israel, notice how that cloud, it separated them, and it was darkness to Egyptians, but it was light to Israel. What's going on there? It's God protecting his people. And understand, when he comes with clouds, for sure, he's coming in judgment. But what is he also going to be doing during that time? He's going to be catching us away and delivering us. And so you cannot blame futurists for interpreting the coming in the clouds in the way they do. When we have 1 Thessalonians 4, when it says, "For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord." And futurists, when we see him coming in the clouds, we only see our deliverance. And again, part of that too, we've got this left behind, thief in the night mentality where we just disappear and nobody knows what happened. They think aliens did it. That's dumb. We disconnect it from Revelation 1:7. "Behold, he cometh with clouds, and every eye shall see him." That is just an error. That is wrong. No, when he comes, he's coming with clouds. And that does mean judgment on the world, but it means deliverance for us, and we are going to be taken out. And that is exactly what we see in Matthew 24, in verse 36. "But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only." Now the pre-tribbers, they all use this to prove imminency, but then they all say Matthew 24 is not the rapture, which is also dumb, and it is a huge inconsistency. No pre-tribber should ever say, "No man knows the day or the hour," when somebody predicts the day or the hour of the rapture, when they don't believe Matthew 24 is about the rapture. That's just a side note. But no, this is about the rapture. And notice it says, "But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying, giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Then shall two be in the field, the one shall be taken, the other left. Two women shall be grinding in the mill, one shall be taken, the other left. Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come." Now the preterists, again, they see that, and they see it's a gathering for judgment. That the one taken and one left, yeah, they're being gathered for judgment. I hear all the preterists are saying that. And guess what? They're right. Now the futurists, they look at that and they say that's us being taken out. That is also right. We have one taken, one left. One's being delivered like Noah and his family. One is being delivered like just Lot and his family. And another one is being gathered for judgment. That's exactly what we see in Revelation 14. In Revelation 14, we're seeing a reaping of the believers, and we're seeing a reaping that's casting people into the winepress of the wrath of God. So again, the preterists are right about the coming in clouds being a reference to judgment. But at the same time, it's crystal clear in the scriptures that also though means deliverance for us, because God gathers us up before he pours out his judgment on the world. And so, the coming in clouds is a reference to judgment, but not necessarily a single exclusive day. Because, and the preterists actually proved this for us. Because, again, they use Isaiah 19. We have the Lord coming in the clouds. Yeah, and they would agree that is a reference to him judging Egypt. And they don't believe that was in 70 AD. So they're right. Yes, the coming in clouds is a reference to judgment. It's a reference to a coming of armies. God's bringing these armies in to judge different nations. And I do believe that is exactly what happened in 70 AD. I believe God brought judgment on Jerusalem through the Roman armies. In Daniel chapter 9, okay, all of that is about judgment on Jerusalem. If you actually take the time to read verses 1 through 23, you will see that it talks about the judgment that they received through the Babylonians and things, and it said it was God doing it. He actually, and I'm not going to take time to read it, Daniel even references a passage in Deuteronomy where God said that if they don't follow him, if they break his covenant, that God was going to bring judgment and God was going to send armies on them. And that's exactly what happened with the Babylonians. The Babylonian armies that came on Israel was God judging Israel. And the Roman armies coming on Jerusalem in 70 AD was God judging Jerusalem. And so Matthew 26:63, futurists dance around this verse a lot, but it says, this is when Jesus is on trial. But Jesus held his peace, and the high priest answered and said unto him, I adjure thee by the living God, that thou tell us whether thou be the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus saith unto him, Thou hast said, Nevertheless I say unto you, hereafter shall ye see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power, and coming in the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest rent his clothes, saying, He has spoken blasphemy. What further need have we of witnesses? Behold, now ye have heard his blasphemy. And they understood what he was saying right here. They understood this. And in the futurist world, we got to somehow make this about something coming in the future. But no, this was, I believe, a reference to him coming in judgment on them in 70 AD and judging Jerusalem. The world was not judged in 70 AD. Okay? The Romans brought judgment on Jerusalem. They won the battle. The Roman Empire did not fall in 70 AD. They went on for hundreds of years after that. God did not. And so the preterists, what they will do is they will take this prophecy about a local judgment, and they act like all prophecy had been fulfilled through that. No, this is another example of God showing a sample judgment on the world that was a picture, that was a foreshadowing, that was a type of the ultimate judgment day that has been being preached since Enoch. Now, does anybody think when Enoch in Jude 1:14 was prophesying that he was talking about a judgment on Jerusalem? This was pre-flood. Jerusalem was not a thing during this time. And it says, in Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints. That sounds like armies. Sounds like the armies of heaven. That's what it talks about in Revelation 19. It's the armies of heaven, not the Roman army. No, the armies of heaven. You see, one day, the Lord himself is going to come to earth in the clouds. The Lord himself is going to judge the earth. The armies of heaven are going to follow him. And they are going to come. And the world is going to face judgment. That is crystal clear in the scriptures. In Jude 1:15, to execute judgment upon all, to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds, which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches, which ungodly sinners have spoken against them. This was not a reference to Jerusalem. This was about coming judgment on the world. And yes, that judgment that was going to come on the world, it's going to come with the Lord coming in clouds. It's going to be armies. And so throughout time, there have been events where God has judged nations, cities, and he's done it with armies, and it was God's judgment. And the prophets, they would, like in Isaiah 19, they would write about these things in a very apocalyptic way that for sure we could look at and we can make application for the future and the coming day of judgment. But that wasn't the interpretation. It was a local judgment. And so one of the biggest mistakes that futurists have made is they have ignored the interpretation of things like the Olivet Discourse, and they've only made application. And I believe the application that they make is good. I mean, of course it is appropriate to go to Matthew 24 and talk about Christ returning. Absolutely, it's appropriate to do that. But at the same time, we don't have to ignore the fact that he's prophesying judgment coming on Jerusalem. We don't have to ignore the fact that he's warning them about and shows in the Olivet Discourse a potential negative outcome if they're not ready. And guess what? They weren't ready. And so, yeah, there are certain things that did not happen in 70 AD that we read about in Matthew 24. And of course they didn't happen because Israel wasn't ready. But again, in Revelation, we read about very similar things. And we do believe and we do see that when Christ comes again, this time we will be ready. You know why? Because we've been made ready, not through the things of the temple, not through our works. We've been made ready through Jesus Christ. We've prevailed by the blood of the Lamb. There's a big difference in that. In 70 AD, we see at the very end, you know what? We see the Jews hiding up in the temple. The temple couldn't protect them. We see in the future, we're going to be hid because of Jesus Christ. We are protected because we all have sought protection in Jesus Christ, in the work that he has done for us. Our claim to salvation is faith in the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, and his body and blood has cleansed us. It's made us ready. And so the second coming will have a better outcome than the first coming had. And so just understand when you listen to preterists, they're saying a lot of true things, but then they're jumping to false conclusions with it. And it is a false conclusion when somebody concludes that Christ is not literally, physically, visibly going to return someday. And most of them too, they don't even teach that he literally, visibly returned, like in like manner as they saw him go into heaven in 70 AD. They just believe that coming in, the Roman armies, they believe it was fulfilled just like Isaiah 19 was fulfilled, where I don't believe the Lord rode on a cloud visibly in Egypt when that happened. I do think it was using apocalyptic language, and it was through I think it was the Assyrians that did that. But it's the same thing too. It doesn't change the fact the Bible used that language for a reason, because these events were a picture of what was to come. And God does that a lot in the scriptures. Two great examples, and I'll close with this. Whenever the Bible is talking about judgment coming on the world, it always would reference the flood and the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Why was it always doing that? Those events were proofs that God was going to judge the world one of these days. We don't have 6,000 years of history of God threatening to judge the world and threatening judgment. No, we have history of all kinds of judgments, and God did those things as like a sample, as a proof, so we would understand he means what he says, and he says what he means. He is going to judge the world one of these days. And it's the same thing when God judged Jerusalem, when the Lord judged his people in 70 AD, and they were destroyed because they did not receive Jesus as the Messiah, and they crucified the Messiah. All of us today, we're supposed to look at that and say, you know what? If the Lord destroyed his own nation, if he destroyed his own people who rejected him, what will he do to a world that has rejected him? What will he do when he returns? And you know what? We know exactly what he'll do. He will destroy this world. He will destroy those. But we also know, too, he'll deliver the righteous. He'll deliver those who have put their faith and trust in him. And so in the futurist world, we do need to make sure we educate people on the significance of 70 AD and what that was. It was a sample. It was a foreshadowing. It was not the ultimate judgment day. It was a day of the Lord, but it wasn't the day of the Lord. It was judgment, but it wasn't the judgment. It was Christ coming in judgment, but not his coming in judgment that we're waiting for, that Enoch prophesied, that's coming to all the world. You cannot take that event out of the Bible. There is one thing that's been prophesied from the beginning: physical resurrection and a day of judgment. There is a resurrection day coming. There is a day of judgment. Those things have not happened. Don't let anyone deceive you into thinking those things have happened. We are waiting for the Lord. We are waiting for his return. We are looking for him. We are watching for him. We will rise again one of these days, and the Lord will judge the world. And we have, in the first century, the resurrection of Christ was proof of our resurrection, according to 1 Corinthians 15. And the judgment of Jerusalem in 70 AD was proof of a coming judgment of the world in the future. He said it was just one city. Well, it was just one person that resurrected at Christ's resurrection. But it's going to be all of us one of these days, and you can't separate those things. So let's properly label these things. Let's properly identify these things. And don't let the preterists take away your blessed hope. They are wrong, and it is heresy to teach that there is no resurrection of the dead. We will rise again one of these days, and I'm looking forward to that day. So thank you all for watching this. Be prepared. Hopefully one of these days we're going to have that debate with William Bell. He's going to have to probably have another month of study and research after if he watches this video. But we're ready to go. We're ready to go and ready to take these people to task. They are dead wrong. So thank you all for watching this. We'll see y'all next time. God bless.